Welcome for people. So, just to say quickly, welcome on my behalf. Thank you to Margaret. Thank you to Peter for setting this up. Thank you most of all to Bruno. It's so interesting, and you're very, very, very welcome. Margaret, do you want to go next? But you'll need to unmute.
Sorry, okay. Just the way you didn't hear me swearing. Welcome, Bruno. It's wonderful to have you here at SIPSOC Live. We met in July, the ISSS conference, and got chatting, and Cybernetics ensued. Whitehead ensued, and lots of fun learning about space governance on my side and how complicated the whole issue actually is. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how we could perhaps help Bruno, for part of his PhD at least, work through some of the cybernetic aspects of the governance issues that he'll present to us today. Welcome, Bruno.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter Kavalek, Peter Tandenham also. I'm very grateful to you, Meg, because as you mentioned, you introduced me to the cybernetic world, and it's making a lot of sense to me in the research I'm developing. So it's really a pleasure to be here. You see some friends around. Richard, I've been in touch also with Alina, so I'm really glad to be around here. Let me share my screen. Okay. The control here. Let me just see. I want to see the meeting. Show meeting. Okay, now I can see you and also make the presentation. Wonderful. So the topic today will be about redesigning the space governance for the new space era, a cybernetic approach. I'll be sharing with you part of the research I did during my master and what I'm doing during my PhD and where I am right now, and the next steps I also will be discussing with you. The presentation is structured in 4 different blocks. I'll make a brief intro about me and where I live. We'll make some comments about the space race and the space law. There are important dimensions on space law influencing the dynamics of the space, let's call ecosystem. The next one's about space economy, the size of this economy, how much is expected to be growing. Some comments about the old and the new space militarization and the space weaponization. It's an important topic as space sustainability, space debris. Then I will bring this topic to governance, cybernetic speaking, and be sharing with you closing remarks and open discussion for us. So, mentioning Whitehead, reality is not static. It's a process of becoming. So the question is, what is the space ecosystem becoming? What is this flow happening? That's what we're trying to discuss today. So I live in São José dos Campos. Is the city where Embraer, the Brazilian aircraft manufacturer, is located. I studied at the Technological Institute of Aeronautics, this picture here. ITA was created in the 50s by professors from MIT. Actually, the first president was a MIT professor, the first dean, and it's within the Air Force Base. And through ITA, Embraer was created 10 years later, in the 60s. Here we have the National Institute of Space Research that is also here where I live. This is their Center for Satellite Testing and Integration. And here's the region where I live within Brazil. So I came into the space because my father worked at the National Institute of Space Research for 20 years. And 2001, he decided to start a company called Orbital Engenharia to manufacture space solar arrays. This is a Brazilian multi-mission platform launched in India. Also, later, we developed a suborbital microgravity platform, is this red one here. It flies upon 100 kilometers, separates from the rocket, and flies stabilized in 3 axes to make microgravity experiments. We have flight heritage with this technology, and the main one we are developing right now for the Brazilian Air Force is a hypersonic vehicle. So I studied mechanical engineering at the São Paulo State University. Later, had the chance to go into the defense world with my first introduction into defense in the Brazilian Superior War School. I did my master's at ITA in space science and technology, and I'm following the sequence. I'm doing my PhD in space science and technology also. So some topics about the space race and the space law. First is where does space begin, right? It's about 100 kilometers above what's called the Kármán line, then is considered space, because below it is considered a country airspace, air domain. So above 100 kilometers is space. Considering now a timeline overview of the space exploration, since the first satellite launched in 57, NASA was created in 58, it was going on. And then in 98, with the International Space Station, for me, there is an inflection point and the dynamics of this ecosystem that we'll be talking. And right now, Mars and the Moon are the big topics for space exploration. So a bit about the space laws. UN has the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. This treaty was signed in 67. And there are some topics that I would like to highlight with you in order for us to think if it is also, let's say, taking place nowadays or not, or either if something has changed. For example, the exploration and use of outer space shall be carried out for the benefit and the interest of all countries. Outer space shall be free for exploration and use by all states. Outer space is not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty. States shall not place nuclear weapons or other weapons of mass destruction. The moon and other celestial bodies shall be used exclusively for peaceful purpose. Astronauts shall be regarded as envoys of mankind. States shall be responsible for national space activities, whether carried out by governmental or non-governmental entities. States shall be liable for damage caused by their space objects, and states shall avoid harmful contamination of space and celestial bodies. And it's one of the points we'll be discussing about sustainability and space debris. So let's have it in mind, because will be important for us to make this comparison, since several countries signed the Outer Space Treaty. The other treaties, no, they didn't. But mainly this one was also signed by Brazil. Brazil was one of the countries. And here is the picture in 67 when they were signed. UK was also present. So this is I think the cornerstone of the space law. Later we had other ones like the Registration Convention, the Moon Treaty in 79, which was rejected by the West, citing the Moon Treaty as an attempt at constraining free enterprise. And then 2010-20, we have the Artemis Accords, the principles for cooperation, the civil exploration, use of the moon, Mars, comets, and asteroids for peaceful purpose, and was signed by, let's say, the space allies to the American government, and affirms individual states' right to engage space with the private sector. And we'll see how it evolves also in terms of space collaboration. How is this network evolving through time? For me, the Commercial Space Act, launched in 1998 by the US, is the inflection point from what we call the old space and the new space. Its goal was to encourage the development of a commercial space industry in the US and for other purposes. We have a limitation in this study that I'm presenting. It might be US and European centric because it's difficult to get the data and to find the articles to make the research. But I'll be pinpoint also other countries explaining these dynamics happening within the space industry. But so the Commercial Space Act for me is the inflection point, and we'll be discussing why. The US government decided to change how cargo and astronauts were traveling to the International Space Station. So they decided to leave it to the industry to provide the service. They were hiring now launching services. Doesn't matter if it was with any rocket, any vehicle that you were willing to use. The American government was making a statement about how much they were willing to pay for this transport, let's call it, for this logistic. And then this one opened the doors for the private market development for space in the US. So some figures about the space economy. Some sources, they mention that the space industry might reach $1 trillion in 2030. Other sources, they mention 2040. The key message is the industry is growing. This source is mentioning $630 billion. An outlook from 2024. Unfortunately, it wasn't published yet, the closure of 2025, but it's around $600 billion, this global space economy. 86 billion US, 38 Europe, and 45 Asia. I think difficult to prove this data about Asia, for example, regarding India and China. We might have a surprise ahead, I think, regarding how they are developing their own, let's say, venture capital also ecosystem. So regarding the space exploration market, it is 63% composed by US, 22 China, 6% the European Space Agency, 2 Japan, 1 Russia. For me, the main message here is the moon exploration. How much is being invested for moon exploration is the main topic and being discussed in the space industry, is the hot topic. Regarding the venture capital, it's from 2009 to 25. Actually, this report was launched today, 30 minutes before our meeting here. I received the email and I took a snapshot to be sharing with you. So the accumulated value invested is around $430 billion, more or less half in US, more or less half in Europe. That's why I'm mentioning how difficult it is to get this data from India, China, and the other markets. But we have some comparisons here, some points to be watching in comparison with space law. We made, for example, in '84, we had the Commercial Space Launch Act, ended by the government monopoly by legalizing private rocket launches. In '98, as I mentioned, for me is the inflection point within this industry. They mandated the government to buy private service and open the ISS to commerce. In 2010, they turned NASA into a customer, funding SpaceX, Boeing to replace government shuttles. So usually, the space policy outcome takes from 10 to 50 years for you to see the result. And the Americans, they did it well regarding space. What was planned and what happened 10 or 15 years ahead, as we can see later regarding this boom in the venture capital and also the growth, for example, for SpaceX. Space mining is there is a huge expectation also. There is this issue regarding, okay, if I'm exploring the moon or any asteroid, this economic value belongs to whom? The moon belongs to whom? If any country is making money out of it, to whom belongs this value? That's one of the questions. But there is a huge expectation. There are investments around it for space exploration. So there is a variety of applications and fields within this space economy, from Earth observation, reusable rockets. They are very common nowadays. Space planes, space debris, we'll be discussing more today. It's a very important issue. Manufacturing, satellite servicing, low Earth orbit, geostationary satellites, military communication, space tugs, orbital terminals, orbiting tanks. So there are different fields being explored in the space economy. Now talking about the SpaceX, it was published in October 13, 25. SpaceX plans to go public with a valuation around $1.5 trillion. And there is this other source here making this comparison. Of course, we are making a comparison here between apples and oranges, because we are talking about NASA budget, comparing it with SpaceX revenue. Those are different dimensions, but the amount around 20 billion or 25 billion, I've added this question mark because I think the important message is the size. How big is SpaceX getting? Not specifically this comparison between revenue and the NASA budget. So the cost of a space flight here is for low Earth orbit. We'll be talking about what is low Earth orbit and what does it mean. Is getting lower around nowadays, more or less, right? $1,000. Some sources they say $1,200. So depends, but the key topic is from the 70s here, or in the 80s, with space shuttle going from $25,000 per kilo of payload launched down to $1,000. It's impressive now what is happening. Here's the snapshots of the main launchers being described here. Here's the Chinese one, the Russian one. They are good and reliable launchers also from India. And the point is, it's not only difficult for you to develop a launcher. Once you have developed, it's even more difficult to have a market and to have customers around you, because to reach this level of competitiveness is very difficult. And besides that, what's even worse, when launching a satellite or payload, you need to have insurance. So imagine how often SpaceX is launching satellites. Last year was each 2 days they were launching a rocket. And in comparison with any other, let's call it eventually a Brasilia launcher. If I have a CubeSat, let's say for commercial purpose, or a small sat, it would be if not with the incentive of the government, would be difficult to be competitive against SpaceX, for example. And besides that, insurance is a big issue, and it's always in place in any space activity or mission. I found this picture about India and how they are evolving, for example, in missions regarding the moon, the ISRO, the Indian Space Agency. I had the opportunity to see a little bit of what they're doing at the last International Astronautical Congress in Sydney last year. And they've built a company to help their private companies, things research, funding, venture capital, market development, market intelligence. So they had a huge booth with all of those companies and how they are helping their private sector to grow in this space market. So there's this comparison between old space, some call it legacy space, and the new space. It's a point of academic discussion, even new space. But the point is, there are journals called New Space. It's I think became common in the academic speaking and also business-wise to talk about new space. So what we had before during the space race, when the international cooperation began and the commercialization. The agents, they issue a call for tenders. For example, for the tank for the shuttle, which was made by Lockheed. I'll be illustrating in the next slide here. The companies responded to this call for tenders. Work was performed, and revenue was earned through milestone payments. Even nowadays, for example, the Brazilian space program is common this model, this business model, let's call it. And what is happening now within the new space? How your funding has a relation with the market, which is changing your process, your business model. Let's call this feedback loops. They are all integrated. It's difficult to see it all together. You need to take different pictures to understand what is happening, what's the business model within the new space. So illustrating just for an example here to accommodate our cybernetic thought, let's call in the old space, the recursion level, the United Nations Outer Office for Space Affairs. We had the countries level, the recursion level 2 space agents being NASA, and the European Space Agency was created later. Lockheed was Lockheed Company, a corporation, was not Lockheed Martin yet. But this was the structure and the recursion levels that we'll be discussing also cybernetic speaking. This is a social network analysis. I saw this presentation also in the Astronautical International Congress in Milan, 2024. And it caught my attention. This picture is from 58 to 23. From 58 to 2007, how the countries were cooperating and how they were organized, and how is from 2008 to 2023. I've received this original article. Unfortunately, the resolution is not so high to have a clear view of the countries name by name, but here is mainly US allies. Here is Africa, Latin America, more or less China and Russia around here. So before, for example, countries could be enemies on the ground and allies on space. Let's call it the US and Russia. In the International Space Station, this kind of cooperation on space, they had no boundaries, let's call it. Nowadays, it has changed. This structure has a lot of geopolitical influence, and some countries, and the author mentioned it during her presentation, Brazil, we didn't make yet, let's call it, a choice regarding our partners. For example, there is a cooperation between Brazil and China for the China-Brazil Earth Research satellites since the 80s, the late 80s. We have cooperations with the US government. We had a space cooperation with Ukraine. We had with Russia. So we didn't, of course, with the European Space Agency. Some satellites from Brazil, they were launched by India. So the point is, she said, Brazil soon will have to make a choice. Nowadays, we are cooperating with everybody. We don't have enemies, let's call it. We didn't pick a side, but soon will be needed, because not making a choice will become a choice soon. Nowadays it's fine, but that's what I think. I'm sharing with you my perception. I like very much this picture. This is illustration it's called From New Space to Big Space, this article. How commercial space dream is becoming a reality. We have a lot of variables influencing, external variables influencing the dynamics of this space ecosystem, and being new money, as we saw, $400 billion invested in the space VC, new actors, new ways of working. We have like Amazon. Amazon is not a space player, but it's influencing a lot the space sector. We have new policies like the Artemis. We saw new technologies, new chains, new markets emerging. And within the space ecosystem, as a primary energy, venture capital has a role. There is a discussion in place if the VC has worked only for US and not for other countries, because it is difficult to copy and paste what they did in order to have a significant growth and a significant venture capital ecosystem. There are important challenges to replicate it abroad. Regarding the climate, the regulatory bodies, like also frequency, you're launching your satellite, but which bandwidth, how you're communicating with Earth, it's important to have this, let's call, licensing regarding your frequency. The national policies and defense agents, as we'll be discussing in the next chapter, the space militarization. So it influences the launch industry and the markets and customers. So it's a good picture to understand what they call the Darwinism and the space ecosystem. Regarding the space militarization, there are more than 20 countries with Space Force. We have the West one announced in 2018, got operational in 2019. with 1,000 people. France, Germany, I'll be illustrating the UK Space Command, and also Italy has plans around it. So the UK Space Command, making space safe, secure, and sustainable for all generations, integrating sea, land, air, and the cyberspace. They're mentioning also the international cooperation being critical in the space domain. No one nation can do it alone. And protecting the UK's interest in space, monitoring what is happening, space debris, the maneuvers needed to avoid any damage in space. The space sustainability. This is an important picture to have a glance, to have an idea of the amount of objects orbiting around Earth. But the point is the outer space it is itself a problem, or there are specific orbits, specific altitudes that really is a problem? In order to understand that, I'm going to quickly go through the types of Earth orbit, be by inclination, having equatorial, polar, or inclined orbit, by shape. But for space debris mainly, it's important for us to understand, for example, low Earth orbit. It means from 160 up to 2,000 kilometers. The medium Earth orbit from 5,000 kilometers up to 10,000, and the geostationary, mainly for communication purpose, more or less 35,000 kilometers. This is a report published by the European Space Agency regarding the space environment, and we can see that the increase of objects in low Earth orbit. It's almost an exponential curve. Here is the cumulative number of catastrophic collisions with no further launches to 25 on. So there is a huge warning regarding this. And the the biggest challenge is around in low Earth orbit is around 500 kilometers. It's where the problem actually is. Just to illustrate, the International Space Station is orbiting Earth around 400 kilometers, and the Starlink, with its 9,200 active satellites, around 480 and 550 kilometers. So the Starlinks are very condensed around this peak in the graphic. There might be also military objectives regarding this communication network, because you may have a space, a solar tempest, for example, a solar wind, like we had last year. Okay, for example, let's call half of your satellites are below the Earth, not facing the sun. Okay, I may lose, let's call it 5,500 satellites. Still, I got 5,500 satellites. And if we are talking about anti-satellite weapon, okay, I may shoot down one satellite, I may shoot down two satellites, but it's difficult to imagine this capacity to shoot down 9,200 satellites. Like Ukraine, the influence that Starlink had providing communication, it's evident this military purpose, and which role it's playing, right? Is S3, S2 becoming S5? We'll be discussing later also. Now, bringing our conversation to the cybernetic lenses. I like very much the definition brought by Professor Eisen on this on governance being this capacity to steer the organization to navigate in this, let's call this ecosystem. And he brings this governance in the Anthropocene. I like his article and his book. I like the definition and how he presents the topic. He mentions the first and second order. The first one with civil society and the state, the judiciary and private sector and media. The way he explains in his book what is happening, for example, with the judiciary and laws. He wasn't mentioned Brazil, but I thought, whoa, there might be some inspiration because exactly what is happening. And then in the second order, he brings the biosphere, the technosphere, and the social purpose. Is something we're discussing here. Are we missing it? For example, regarding space activities, it's really necessary to have this amount of investment regarding the moon, regarding Mars. What is this? Is there any social purpose behind it? Do we have other priorities? No? So it's an open question that we'll be discussing. And I'm adapting this framework introduced by Professor Ray Eisen to the space governance. I'm adding, instead of the biosphere, I'm bringing the outer space and adding the private sector and the space force, the militarization of space. Instead of the judiciary or laws, I'm bringing the space law. The media also has an important influence. The role that the civil society is playing, the state, I bring the state and also the space agencies, and as he did, the social purpose and the technosphere. We'll be using this framework to discuss what is happening and the purpose, the identities around it. So bring back this discussion of recursion levels. It's for discussion. Let's think about what we had in the 60s and late 60s with the UN. I'm just illustrating the US, NASA, and Lockheed, which was a provider of a tank to the space shuttle. And for new space, I think it's unclear. Who is System 5? Who is playing S3 role? Who is playing S2 role? Because if we think about UN was coordinating the effort between countries and their space agents to discuss the Outer Space Agreement. It was a policy. So through a S2 role, was publishing S5, a policy, looking for the future, interacting with the environment, very clear the S4 role. Not clear the S3 because the resources they didn't belong to UN, but the S2 is clear. The UN was coordinating for example, the Outer Space Agreement. When we go to the new space, the Moon Treaty wasn't signed by US, but US published by their own the Artemis Accord, which also was signed by Brazil, Canada, Europe, and a lot of countries. So, which role does UN play nowadays? It's an open question. And the power, this kind of agreements that they have, as we saw in the network analysis, before, let's call with the Outer Space Agreement was all together, and how this network, these international corporations are being far apart. And then who could be the recursion level 3? The countries. We could have also companies. So that's why for me it's unclear these recursion levels on new space. that's the this illustration about the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, that we talk about the S2 role and publishing this as a law, as a S5. NASA had a very clear role, let's call it VSM role, a complete one, having the budget, S3, monitoring S3 star, coordinating, hiring companies with, let's call them S1, the companies like Lockheed Corporation back in the shuttle's time, and how it's evolving in comparison with SpaceX as we saw it. What's this magnitude of power that now belongs to the private sector? That's the discussion. Having put in the center, it is a feedback loop here. These arrows are going back and forth, but just they're all interconnected. But for our discussion, I'm putting here the private sector in its center. And when we think about Cybernetics, speaking about the VSM, for example, what's the power that SpaceX has? For example, once again, Ukraine, regarding budget, regarding the company power to see the future and to have this next generation of launchers. That we saw this cost is going is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to have access to space. Of course, depends also on what's your payload. If it's a military one, the answer might be no, or you're getting, I think, into the end of the line and waiting for your payload to be launched. But the power this company has and how and this S5, S4 roles it's playing is something also for our discussion regarding space governance. And the moon, as we saw, one of the main topics for us, it's the main topic for space exploration the next years. Who owns the moon, right? That's the question. And I'm bringing the moon in the center of the discussion because which state are we talking about? Which law? Which society? For which purpose? I was having a talk with a professor that I admire very much. His name is Antonio Yukio Ueta. He's a professor at the Federal University of São Paulo and also a professor at the International Space University. And he was talking about the challenge for them to think about the moon, let's call it as a society. And then I introduced to him the VSM. It's okay, but there should be in place a S5, an S3, a S4, S2 role. He appreciated very much the idea. We are writing an article to be published. We are willing to present it this year, the International Astronautical Conference, regarding cybernetic look to the moon, and discuss these functions around the VSM and the moon, right? And I like very much this concept. Are we colonizing the future? Professor Yukio presented me the Good Ancestor. This book is on my left here that I'm going to read very soon. But I like this concept. Are we colonizing the future? That's a good question. Bringing back the international cooperation, each international space organization as a VSM. I think it's difficult to see it all within only one VSM. Seems purpose one, like Africa and Middle East, China, Latin America. For example, there is a Latin American space agency in place, growing importance in this analysis. We have US. So it's interesting to use these cybernetic lenses to understand these dynamics. Space sustainability is about the same, putting the outer space in the center. What is the social purpose? What about civil society? To whom I need to ask for permission to put 10,000 satellites on low Earth orbit? US is doing it, China is doing the same, India. So there is this, let's call, open arena around space sustainability. Because where is the court? Where you're going to be judged? If you're not, for example, if you're in, let's call, the Artemis Accord, and let's call anything about the moon. So I think we are missing this S5 sense, this identity, this purpose. That's why it's an open question. We might have the situation regarding the space sustainability. Now I'm bringing a paper I presented at ISSS last year using the systemic intervention theory by Professor Gerald Migley. And what I found here was this battle of the VSMs, because for the militaries, space, they have a military interest. They are interested from this application. The space agents is willing to develop our local industry. There is a claim also for venture capital. There are different initiatives in place, but once again, where is the identity? Where is the purpose? In this paper, we can clearly see this. Let's call this role here judgment. How different they are. About the recursion level, when I was doing my master's, I had an idea. 80% of the Brazilian space industry is within the São Paulo state. The main research foundation is also in São Paulo state. São Paulo state is the richest state of the nation, of the country. São Paulo itself would be comparable to Switzerland economy. So the National Institute of Space Research, the Institute of Aeronautics and Space is also at my city here in São José dos Campos. So my thought was, and we have the challenge within São Paulo state, natural disasters, and the mobility, weather, you name it. There are a lot of space applications. There are different places there where space technologies could be a solution for the society. Then I had this idea: why not? Should we have a space agents at São Paulo state? And nowadays, it's the Brazilian Space Agents is within the Ministry of Science and Technology. So it's the federal level. And then my perception is that it's too far from the needs you have, let's call, within the state. Agriculture purpose, for example, each state produces, they have a different, they have different, let's call DNAs, they have different calls to produce soybeans, orange, etc. Then we've put together the president of the Brazilian Space Agents, the military entity, also the brigadier in charge, the director of the National the National Institute of Space Research. So the main stakeholders, they were there. We did a focus group. We presented to them, and we left it as an open discussion. And the conclusion was that it makes sense to create this recursion level from the federal one to the state level. It was published December this year. This article, bringing back some concepts from Professor Gerald Migley. His article from 92, The Sacred and Profane, Who's Being Left Marginalized. I enjoy very much what he brings in this article. If we put the private sector in the center, who is being left marginalized? If we are prioritizing space militarization, space weaponization, who is being left marginalized? And the same rationale for the moon. So as next steps, I'm doing a systematic review about systemic governance and reading some books. And by March, I need to finish this phase. I'll be conducting a study of the Brazilian and Italian space ecosystem and governance evolution, how they're evolving, in partnership with some colleagues from the Polytechnic of Milan. They have a new space observatory there. I'll go twice this year to get the data and structure this research with them. I'm very interested about organizational concurrency. And I have some open questions. Now, how can cybernetics be applied in a predictive manner to new space governance? What does viability mean for new space organizations? And what would an architecture for new space governance look like? And I'm giving back the word and the floor to Peter, and I will leave this as open questions also for our discussion, and I'm available also for any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well done, Bruno. Really well done. And as you can see in the chat, there's a lot of response going through there, and a lot of questions being asked. Rather than race to the chat, what I suggest we do is just, if we give people a moment to see if anybody wants to come on screen on the microphone and ask a question live. Meantime, myself and Peter T will have a look at the chat and bring some of those points in. But anyone want to come in and ask a question live here? There's so much to go at. Anyone want to go first?
All right.
Yeah. David, are you up for this? Oh, Richard, please.
Well, yeah, that was great, Bruno. Sorry, David, I'll just jump in there. What I'm intrigued by, and I'm sorry, I've been dumping lots of stuff in the comments, but really interested in the interaction between the space economy and the governance thereof and terrestrial economy. And it seems to me that it's not possible to kind of isolate them. I mean, yes, you'll have to set the conceptual framework up, but that conceptual framework's got to be intimately connected with what's going on down here on good old Mother Earth. And the thought occurs to me, having just heard a little bit about what they're doing with Minecraft in terms of digital twin simulation of societies and economies. I'm just wondering whether we're nearly at a stage where you can use those kinds of techniques to do the simulation of the game, as I think Richard Berry was suggesting. It's an infinite game territory, and I think maybe that's what we're looking at. But we've still got the conceptual lenses of system thinking to see what emerges once you get down to the right level of granularity between different organizations doing different things with different objectives and so on and so forth. I think we're there. I think we're getting very, very close to where a very interesting kind of almost near real world simulation is going to be possible. So maybe we go that route.
Yeah, very interesting, Richard. Bruno?
Yeah. I'm glad to see you here, Richard. It's a pleasure. I think you bring a good point, if I understood it correctly, like the use of a digital twin, for example, something like it to simulate, understand also the consequences. Like, for example, some system dynamic lenses. Once you simulate this system, there are some dynamics emerging that's not so easy to see. And for, let's call for specific systems, could be also a possibility for simulation. But I think it's it makes sense, and it's a very interesting opportunity to be explored.
Great.
Thank you. Really great. Anybody else want to come in live here into Space Command? And anyone want to come in live on the microphone?
Well, let me ask you, Bruno, are you currently working in the aerospace industry, or are you a full-time student?
Full-time
Both.
student.
Right.
I'm a shareholder at my family business company. I'm also running a deep tech company, a venture builder company in Brazil, but I have 9 partners there. And for both, I said I'm gonna ask for excuse. In some years, I'll be back. For example, in shareholders meeting, this kind of appointment, I'm able, but my full agenda is on research, on whitehead texts, this kind of lenses, the VSM. So I would say it's almost a very dear friend of mine once told me, Bruno, there are 2 things that are incompatible in life: working and doing the PhD. I have a point. I have a point. My father did his PhD while working. My sister did the same. I know it's possible, I know it's feasible, but once you have the chance, as I'm having, I think it's better to go on full mode and to make a deep dive, and also to have the chance to do what we're doing here, to interact and to bring new lenses, new texts to read. So I'm full mode, and especially this year, I will be some months in Italy at this New Space Observatory. So I agree with this recommendation I received from this friend of mine. So I prefer to go on full mode.
That makes sense. Now, you opened your whole presentation with a picture of Whitehead and a quote. Would you like to expand a little bit on how you see Whitehead's work in relation to space governance, particularly, or some of the key points you think we should be thinking about?
I think not seeing the world made by particles or substances, but as a flow. What is flowing in this ecosystem? I like very much. Also, I find very interesting the prehension. How
Yeah.
how is this ecosystem feeling? What is happening? And I think the concurrence. How are they growing? Are they learning? So that's what caught my attention through Whitehead. I had the chance to see Professor Peter Kavalek's talk about him. Today I'm starting also a course, and it's called Whitehead Universe, and I'm doing it. I haven't seen its PST. I thought it would be during the morning, so it starts 10:30 p.m. for me. We'll be finishing after midnight, but it's fine. So I'm beginning those readings about Whitehead, but so far made a lot of sense, and I think it's gonna be the backbone of my PhD thesis, and there's plenty to read about it. I found this from Professor Thor Hertz, a process theory of organization. I just received the book yesterday, so it will be one of the books I'll be studying because it's highly applicable to what I'm studying and willing to develop.
Got lots of hands up now. I think Steve's on my top left there.
Steve, you go next.
Oh, yeah. All right, thank you. Brilliant talk, Bruno. I think, like Peter, I'm probably skeptical that the VSM has a role to play here, but it's interesting. It's a complex system in the way that these things can interact in ways that you can't predict, and especially as you say, you can get these kind of emergent behaviors that you might not have anticipated. So I did make a point in the chat about, could we model this? But then I really like Richard Berry's earlier point about treating it as a game. I think that's actually a really exciting idea. But not using AI as digital twins, but trying to think about the AI almost like a dungeon master to kind of determine which, what could happen in this scenario, come up with something novel that might happen. There might be an alien invasion or something, or a new discovery in an asteroid. So you could really game this out, and I think that would be quite interesting. Be a great game.
Yeah. I agree with you, Steve. I left this point regarding the VSM as an open question. For example, at the space agents level, at this recursion level, I think it's feasible. I didn't do it yet, but to the whole ecosystem or to the country level, with this all of those recursion levels inside, might be a challenge. And I'm curious to test it also. And points taken regarding the AI. I didn't have the chance to read the comments here on the chat, but I'll copy and paste them also to have a look, because they seem what I've heard so far seem very interesting as we are here evolving the discussion. Thank you.
Great. So if I come in next, I'm not quite sure who has their hand up or not, but so first of all, Bruno, you have, when you've studied that Whitehead course, you have to come back, and we need a discussion, a further discussion on that, and you don't have any choice in that. You are invited.
Great, great. The pleasure.
So then, secondly, on the question of viability in the VSM, if I go in there, I think if I start like this and say one of the reasons why this is quite conceptually demanding is there's quite a severe case of when you think about space sort of ontologically, what it is and in a way what it expresses, then you get a very profound sense of, when you approach it as a governance problem, you get a very profound sense of, in a sense, we wouldn't start from here. If we wanted effective governance of space, we wouldn't start from this cluster of countries and nations in effect competing over it. That's what we have. What we have is actually a projection of the kind of the messy problems of the earth. And I think you kind of get this kind of very deep dissonance conceptually between, in a sense, viability is being expressed theoretically in space, but then as you take the problem into the viability of the organizations, we effectively get into this kind of twinning feeling that Richard was raising. Or it's a bit like the competition between organizations of different types on Earth. So I think that whether or not that little statement makes much sense, I think that what we are kind of looking at is a kind of more or less an interruption of viability. by some of these activities. And a kind of question is how to harmonize with space while still pursue some social goals. But in the current reality of where we are on Earth, that's a horrendously naive objective. Nonetheless, I think kind of theoretically, in terms of building the case around the work you're doing, it needs to be reflected that just to recap, we have a dissonance at the heart of what you're doing. And in a sense, then the first question is, how is viability being disturbed? And then how might it be, in a sense, rearranged and optimized for some new compromised position between, in a sense, the profundity of space and what we might want to do with it. Yeah, I hope that makes some sense in some way.
Thank you, Peter. I think how is viability being disturbed? I think there are too many, let's call S5, no? Too many purpose, too many. Should it be a race? No?
Yeah, exactly. Should it be a race?
It was a race. Nowadays we have the moon race.
Yeah.
There,
I mean,
there's
sorry to cut across, Bruno, because your comments are very important, but in some ways, SpaceX looks like a replay of the 17th century in the East India Company in a way. It's found itself a new horizon and then goes there, in a sense, to race and to win and to acquire resources. And do we wish that between the 17th century and the 21st we'd learned a few new games, a few new tricks? Yes, we do, I think. Sorry, Bruno, to interrupt.
No. Thank you very much, Professor. There's a point in Professor Ray Eison's book regarding governance that he mentions we are able to see a new dynamic emerging since the, let's call it Stone Age, what is fire, but it gets too long for us to make a change. While I was reading his book, I was thinking, hey, is it the case for space? No, we see, let's call it, it's not working. There are some important challenges, for example, regards sustainability. But are we going to do something on time, still on time? That was something going through my head, this concern. And I think how to harmonize should it be, I think it would be difficult through a UN dimension because 180, I don't know how many countries should sign, they should agree. If only one country is not in accordance, raise his hand and say, I don't want to sign this. So any agreement, any let's say any new version of the outer space agreement would be over. So through space law seems difficult.
Yeah.
The directions go to the Artemis Accord, right? I hope, don't know, it might any country take the lead and change this purpose, change this perception of the use of space. Bring another scenario. What if we have the Kessler effect on the low Earth orbit, and then then it's the case for us to harmonize it different. For example, for low Earth orbit, I think we are very near. Now the statistics, the numbers are showing that very near to make this space environment on low Earth orbit unbearable. So I don't have the answer, Professor Peter, but it seems or it might be the case for sustainability. So it's impossible to put anything on space flying. So let's coordinate something different, because we will not be feasible anymore to launch or to put, let's say, a Starlink on orbit, or for Earth observation, optical satellites. I'm putting as an open question: is sustainability case to bring this harmonization? Because through militarization, of course, it's not going to happen. Agreements between space agents, we already have those groups combined. So my hypothesis is around sustainability. I will go in this direction.
Yeah, I think what you're doing, just to finish from me, I think what you're doing is wonderful. I think it's so exciting and so interesting, and huge praise to you. I think it's tremendous. But I would also just say that, without going into detail, but there's a lot of technology theory that basically says, in the history of technology, we learn to collaborate when we have problems and when we have disasters. That's when the learning happens. Before then, it's all, let's be first, let's win, let's use. And then when something goes wrong, there's an adjustment, and institutionalization begins to happen, and people begin to collaborate. And perhaps we will have to play that out again in some ways. For example, in low Earth orbit, as you're saying. So wonderful. I think. Thank you so much, and I've taken too much of your time. But let's see what else is kind of out there, and we'll have some further discussions, I hope. Yeah. Have I been holding up anybody?
Alfonso.
Yeah, Alfonso, please. Yes, you're welcome.
Hello. Nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Alfonso.
Great to see
I'm
you.
in the UK right now, working for Satellite Systems Engineering Enterprise. I think, Bruno, you know Joshua. He wanted to come, but he has another meeting and he couldn't make it. I have so with all these, first of all, everything was fantastic. I'm very interested in space as well. I'm trying to pursue as well a PhD. I'm applying to try to get in, and my topic would be space logistics as well, which also brings a new bunch of problems into this governance as well. I can imagine, especially for long routes like Mars, for example, that you need first to go to the moon. And with all these things that have been happening very recently with the US, for example, how can we trust that any agreement made with these big countries, and not just the US, because this can happen with Russia, China, India, how are they gonna hold their side of the deal, for example, when they don't need to, right? Because they have so much power that they don't need to. And the US is proving that right now in terms of UN accords in like going to Venezuela and stuff, threatening with Greenland and stuff like that, which are things that we thought it was crystal clear that everyone has like, okay, yeah, these things, we don't do that anymore. We don't do these things anymore, but we are doing it again, right? On Earth. How the hell are we supposed to create a governance system for space where we don't even like, I find it so distant, and it's something in lines with Peter, with which Peter was saying. I feel like this is going to happen after there's been a bunch of problems, right? Not until we have problems with a colony in Mars. Imagine in 100 years, we're going to start having a proper governance of what's going on there. So I feel like what we are trying to predict is not even new space. It's like future space right now, because we're still in the past, like in many ways. We are in the 16th century of this, right? So my question is, how are you? Because for you, I can imagine your research is changing daily. Like the position you're in, like where you were last year is completely different than this year in terms of governance and politics and stuff like that, right? And that changes how you are predicting the future, right? So is that been a big problem for you? What do you think about this? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alfonso. That's why, for example, discussing the recursion levels, I said it was unclear. There are a lot of changes, very volatile, this environment. There is a video called "A World Without Satellites." I was planning to show it here, but benefit of our time, I decided not to. But it's interesting. This video explain the impact on our routine of within. They think if they mentioned 5 minutes, the world would stop. For example, you were mentioning, Alfonso. For example, how reliable are those partners or are all those partnerships? Let's imagine that we are without GPS. Now, what would happen? For example, the entire air traffic management would be lost. Banks, transactions. So the power those spaces systems have on Earth, it's I think even difficult to imagine how important they are. That's why, for example, Europe has its own, like Galileo. And so I think going back to Whitehead, what I have in mind is to understand this flow. It's flowing which direction, what is happening. That's part of my research to understand and to have this sense, to have this feel, and we'll be, of course, not talking about the globally about this governance. Initially, my thought is regarding Brazil. There are a lot of changes, a lot. Just to give you an example, Alfonso, I agree with you how it's evolving. In December, we had the first commercial launch in Brazil. So the Brazilian government was renting our launch base in Alcântara, Northeast Brazil, one of the best launch site locations on Earth for this activity, to InnoSpace, a South Korean company. And some months before, the government created a state company to manage space commercialization. We have initiatives from the Brazilian Air Force. So it's and of course the launch site belongs to the Brazilian Air Force, but you have a state company in charge trying to bring the private sector on board. It seems like a model we did in the past, trying to do it nowadays. So I'm also curious, Alfonso, to see, let's say, this flow, how it emerged, how we detect it within Brazil. Modern, for example, this network analysis that presented, applying it to Brazil, applying it, for example, in Italy, trying to understand how this governance is evolving. So I hope to be back soon, bringing data and bring more science into this work I'm involved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alfonso.
Yeah, great question, Alfonso. Great reply. Thank you. So I'm looking across. I don't know.
Yeah. Greetings to all. I cannot speak much, but I was thinking about how to pose my question, and I'm having some difficulty. So pardon me if I get lost. But to do it, I will like to go back to your first slides and the problem you posed in the beginning, the treaties and the fact that because everything in Brazil is concentrated in São Paulo state, and you are proposing to have spatial agents in São Paulo. All the things are organizations. So when I talk about that, I'm talking about organizations. In my question has to do with how the treaties and the agreements change because supposing you get a spatial agency in São Paulo. Because an organization has certain structure that your recursive steps reveal, but at the same time, its function is given by how it interacts to the organization, its organization environment that is in other organizations where it's part of. So my question is, if you bring the agents to São Paulo, the input of necessities will be likely to be restricted to the São Paulo state. And how then such agents will be able to promote the goodness for the whole country, for instance. This is it doesn't seem, but it's pretty deep question.
Yeah.
Because of the communication that is behind that. And as Professor Peter Helen, noted, you have other technologies now to bring things close together, because at the beginning we have proximity is physical proximity is the things that really get responses more immediate. And if we do that, you see, the agents in São Paulo will not see the rest of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't see the rest of the country, how it can bind to the treaties that you were the first things that you showed us.
Yeah.
So this is a key point. So it's how an organization become an organization is one thing, is its internal communication, but how it functions is external communication.
Mm-hmm.
Was I clear?
Yes, Mauricio. Great seeing you, and thank you for your question. During my master, I did 60 interviews with let's call important stakeholders in the Brazilian space program. Asking the first question was, is the Brazilian society aware of the benefits of the space activities? And they answered no, they don't have any clue at all of the benefits of the space activities. As a question, I bring in here, are we selling our space program? For example, I need to develop a SAR satellite, a radar satellite, because for, let's say, to agricultural purpose, the radar, the synthetic aperture radar makes more sense. Okay, but you're making this pitch to whom? To the minister, to the space agents, or to the society? Does the society need to know what's a radar satellite and this payload works or not? Or do we need to bring the benefit of this space technology to have more precision on agriculture, on risks, or insurances? I think that there is room for us, let's call it in Brazil, Mauricio, to work on this. It's too far, this topic. It's too far. Another example of this proposal is our funding agency for research in São Paulo State, our dear FAPESP. Should we have something like a different program for space companies? Because we have budget for, you know, Mauricio, like the Sbirne, Small Business Innovation Research. They did it in US through the NSF. You have a grant for phase 1, feasibility. You have a grant for phase 2. Here in Brazil, we have also the phase 3 for scaling, industrial scaling. But the amount of investment need to develop a space company is different because I will say by my own family business company, okay, we had the technology to manufacture a space solar array, but did we have flight heritage? You need to go through all the qualification process to be ready for flight. So, and we are aware that comparing, for example, this research foundation, São Paulo State, with other research foundations we have in Brazil, the budget from FAPEST is much higher. The money available to do so, but who is bringing this message to them that space is different? That if you want to incentivize, if you want to have an industry, if you want to bring it closer to society, being or in partnership with foreign companies, but within Brazil, I think this kind of mechanism could be a way. I'm answering your question with a question back to you. Should we have a space law within São Paulo state? Should the state publish something about? Because Brazil published his outer space law or general law about space. It's not so general. There are some critics about it. It's recent also. It's very new. Also, but their claims mainly about launchers, not the market for downstream. I think there is room to bring the downstream applications from space to the society. We don't have in São Paulo state any law regarding space. The industry is here. The main research foundation from the country is here. And of course, once you're monitoring or orbiting, you're not monitoring only São Paulo state and not only Brazil. It brings, if you have a solution, you have a global solution. For example, agriculture or anything related to natural disaster. That's why I make my point. Defending this idea to be discussed was the first step to bring this recursion level through for the São Paulo state, because it seems that generic tools, or let's call R&D or innovation tools applied to the space ecosystem, probably they will face some challenge as we are facing in the space industry historically. Who was the most successful company in the Brazilian space program? We are about to see. We hope to have good news in the future. We don't have our Embraer, like the Brazilian aircraft manufacturer. Why not? We are in the very same city, the very same institutions. Why did it happen? We were there signing the outer space agreement. But what happened after it? So I think in the first steps, Brazil was on time. Didn't have the US budget, but what happened after it, and what are the chances we have today to progress, to evolve and bring benefits to the society? That's my point. Mauricio, and I thank you very much. Your question, I don't know if I answered it all, but those are the main topics.
You posed that with a question for me, and I don't have an answer for that, but I have an analogy to you for us to think about. Embraer was started in São José dos Campos, but being a company, he's now not anymore confined to São Paulo. Part of the company is out there in other states. You cannot do that with an agency.
Mm-hmm.
And this we must take into account, because it should be some some way a circumvention, a circum path, a pass bypassing of that. But then I don't know how. You see, because I'm not good in politics. But social systems are any social systems, in my opinion, any organization is bounded by communication, and communication in a sense that's much, much wider than the usual idea. For instance, two river basins, sorry, you have two river basins in the Amazon region. They communicate if there is a shadow between them. So this is mass communication. See, is some way of communication, is bringing something in common. And in this sense, I'm talking about communication. Of course, when in the normal way, in the normal world you were working about, this is exchanging signals, words, and ideas, and make them our own. And maybe that if we think about in a more basic level, we can find a solution to transpass these barriers.
Thank you. David's got his hand up.
Hello, hi. I apologise for arriving late. I'm relying on the AI summary of what's gone before, so if I'm sort of a bit off course, I'm sorry again. I've been interested in land law and land allocation about the last 15 years, which is extremely complicated. Professors of law have told me it's a total mess. The kind of British or Norman model has been exported throughout the world, and it seems when there aren't the kind of obvious boundaries in space that there are on land, it gets even more fraught. I don't know how far you've looked at these arguments and then try to move into three dimensions from there. And there's an awful lot of rhetorical argy-bargy about benefits, who should benefit from land, who should benefit from social goods. Allegedly, the Roman Empire divided land ownership into stuff nobody owned, stuff the public owned, stuff that was privately owned, and kind of commons, which was sort of owned, controlled by a group. And yet, when you look at land law, or what you can do in any kind of ownership or collectively public stuff, there are limits. Even if I own a large estate, I can't build a nuclear power plant on it. And although several decades ago I allegedly owned all the land down to the centre of the earth, at a stroke that was taken away when the issue of oil rights and so on came in. So kind of rhetoric, public perception collectively gets very important. I mean, I like the Thomas Sass quote, in the jungle it's eat or be eaten. In the human world, it's define or be defined. And we've got, let's call it very gently, a dialogue going on across the world about the rights or wrongs, powers or otherwise of particular actors, whether they're nations, companies, or individuals, to tap, use, control resources hither and thither. There's an argument on the left about, hey, private property is wrong, it should all be commons, and yet commons can behave as selfishly and as antisocially as in individual actors. I mean, it seems relatively clear to me that one wants to evolve a set of rules, regulations, self-adjusting understandings, which will allow a number of actors to be involved. I mean, space piracy, space malfeasance is going to, I think, even modify the attitude of, let's say, SpaceX and Trump in the simple might is right thing. Isn't going to be totally effective when other people can either sort of knock your things off course or be more of a nuisance. So you're definitely, there's an openness to the rhetoric of producing agreements. I mean, you probably aware of John Locke's defense of private ownership of land, even though when Adam delved and Eve span who then was a gentleman, and in the book of Leviticus, your God says, none of you own the land, none of you can inherit the land. I own it, it's mine, and it's got.
David,
So,
can we sort of, because we're running out of time here, can you sort of direct or invite Bruno to sort of comment on this idea of 3D land?
Well, yeah. I'm just asking him to what extent the massively wide debates, rhetoric, etc., on other forms of ownership, sharing, and whatever are able to inform him and tap him and find good rationales for effective private development of stuff for collective benefit. How do you, I mean, it's the archetypal question really. How do you balance these things up so that the most effective actors are given the resources for a significant degree of collective benefit?
Thank you, David. If I understood your question correctly, what I would say about it is countries are, let's call it, preferring to have and publish their own laws, like Brazil did it was last year. Somehow it's accordance with other agreements, outer space, and there's this dimension that emerged regarding developing a private sector, still military interest on hand. So in the, once again, the International Astronautical Conference, space law is the hot topic also. So the discussions around this area is one of the dimensions I've been studying, but I haven't seen so far any proper or clear proposition around it, David. I think it's still some open issue to be explored regarding space law.
I think Eleanor Ostrom has some stuff which might help, but it's not perfect.
Margaret.
I think I quite enjoyed David's point there about tracing, and Peter's points as well about tracing the historical colonialization patterns, the sort of socioeconomic, political patterns, larger scale. And there are several people who've written very well on that in the systems, complex systems communities. So that might be worth looking at for your extracting of these archetypes, shall we call them, that seem to repeat again and again and again. And that might give you some really nice, deep governance insights.
Yeah.
And because then you can sort of tease out what the differences are very clearly. So, yeah.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you, David. Yeah, makes sense.
Lovely. Peter may have stepped out for a moment, and perhaps I might draw this to a conclusion. Oh, Peter, you are there. I just thought maybe we should conclude.
That's fine, Peter. I think absolutely. I guess what we're doing is going to later in the bar. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't step out to an actual bar, but so let's
You're
do
lining
that
it
now.
up. Okay, yeah, good.
Let's do that. I think it's basically again to say thank you, Bruno. It's a serious invitation to come back and discuss Whitehead at some future occasion, but also why not have an invitation to come back and discuss space. Just discuss this space governance again in the future. So very, very well done. Thank you to Meg. Thank you to Peter. Thank you to all the attendees and all the contributions. I think the questions have been really fascinating. It's that lovely feeling where you do want to go to a bar. So let's get to that phase, shall we, Peter?
Very good.